All right. So much of what has been said this morning already has resonated with what I prepared to say to you. So we can see that as, or at least I see that in some way as God's working through the group of the church as opposed to just individual people. And so you're going to hear things you've heard before, but probably maybe in a way that's a little more nerdy and probably a little less helpful. But essentially, I want to focus in on teaching, because we've heard a lot already about how what we do with kids has to not just be teaching in a sort of a schoolish way. And I want to say from the start that I actually completely agree with pretty much everything Alyssa said earlier. However, teaching does happen in your ministries in different ways. And I think as a church, we need to take teaching more seriously than we do. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. But I wanted to start with this quote by John Bajamra. Probably a lot of the Antiochians, at least, will recognize who John Bajamra was. He worked in religious education in the Antiochian Archdiocese for many years and taught at St. Vladimir's. And I picked this quote because it's not actually that unique. What Bajamra says here, I have found repeated in some form in pretty much all the people who have written about religious education in North America in the last 50 years in the Orthodox community. Okay. In the 21st century, formal pedagogy will be the single most important ministry in the church, especially when the culture in which we choose to live, or which we ourselves created, supports less and less what Christians deem virtuous and ethical. Okay. So I think we're pretty much already there, right? Culture which Christians deem as less than virtuous or ethical, right? All right. So formal pedagogy is just a fancy way to say thinking about how we teach and why. Okay? And how we teach and why is something, a question that needs to be asked on the level of all of your ministries, not just overeducated people like myself, right? Not just the academics. Every time you organize to do something in either a church school setting, in a youth ministry setting, I hope you're asking these questions. Why are we doing what we're doing, and how are we going to do it? So what I want to share with you this morning are 3 convictions that I have sort of culled from all these people who've been thinking about religious education in North America. 3 convictions about what should undergird our teaching, whatever kind of teaching we're doing. Okay, conviction number 1, teaching is a vocation. Okay, what is a vocation? Oh, a job. Somebody said a job. Okay, actually, I was going to say it's not a job. Sorry. Vocation is a calling, right? And actually, a vocation is, in Orthodoxy, we believe a vocation is a gift, right? That Christ has given to the church to help build up the body. And there's different kinds of vocations in the church. Oh, didn't move. There we go. So here's some vocations. And Christ gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ. So my first conviction, well, I'll turn around and I'll ask you, do we think generally of teaching in the church, especially teaching to youth, with this kind of honor, in this kind of company? Right? Not really. It is very possible for somebody to arrive at a parish and be there for a couple coffee hours in a row, and then someone goes up to them and says, "Would you like to teach Sunday school?" Right? Do we do that with any of these other categories? Right? Do we say, "Would you like to be our apostle?" No. Right? We put people in teaching all the time who are wholly unprepared to teach. Right? I put this conviction first because I think this is going to be one of the hardest in a practical sense, for communities to implement, right? Because I think we are so anxious to provide a teaching ministry to our young people that we will provide any teaching ministry to our young people, right? But we really need to start asking the hard questions. Who is teaching? Are they lovers of Christ and the church? Do they like and respect young people? Some of them don't, really. Do they understand and appreciate the role of freedom and the action of the will in spiritual development, right? Do they think that it's just enough to pass along religious knowledge? Why is this important? Because at the end of the day, only disciples make disciples, right? You cannot, as other people have said, give someone something you do not have. If we are as serious about youth formation as this event suggests we are, we need to become more serious about teacher formation. All right, conviction number 2. Whole people, real places. I'm not going to spend as much time on this one, but I believe it is still absolutely crucial. You need to be as serious about getting to know your students and their world as you are about getting to know the material you're trying to teach them. And we don't take that seriously at all, generally, in Orthodox parish education. All right, remember those other vocations? Apostles, evangelists, shepherds. We expect all those jobs to be tuned into the people they are engaging with, to really get to know them, to build a relationship with them, to understand what's going on in their life so that they can be a responsive, spiritual pastor, bishop, evangelist. We pride ourselves in the Orthodox Church in America that, our missionaries were much more responsive to the natives in Alaska than other kinds of missionaries were. But we treat our kids and we teach our kids as if they're all the same. We need to know what's going on in their lives. We need to know what's going on in their schools. We need to know what they're seeing on YouTube. All these things feed into how they hear and how we need to translate all the aspects of the tradition for them. When you walk into a classroom or a youth ministry setting, only half of the learning experience walks in with you. The rest of it walks in with your learner. And if you do not take seriously the datum that is walking in and the experience that is walking in with your learner, you are failing before you start. Okay. I get emails usually a couple of months or every other month or that sort of thing. People saying, I hear you're really interested in curriculum. You know lots about curriculum. What curriculum should I be using? I'm not satisfied with my curriculum. And I love curriculum. I'm a big curriculum, I love the minutia of curriculum and figuring out, what we want to teach kids this week and then over the course of the year and over the course of many years. That stuff really gets me all worked up. But curriculum is never a substitute for human connection. And we will spend hours agonizing over curriculum and no time whatsoever agonizing over our relationship with our kids. Right. So the questions that emerge for me that I hope you guys will take home for conviction number 2 is, what are you doing on a regular basis to get to know your youth? What are you building into your time? You schedule this, you schedule that. What are you scheduling that just helps you get to know them? And what are you doing on a regular basis to help understand their environment better? Is attention to your wider community in your curriculum somehow? And are you helping your kids engage with their communities in some way other than just token? All right. Conviction number 3. Now this is the most complicated one. Discernment, not data, but it touches on a lot of what was said in the other talks already. All right, so what am I getting at with this distinction? I'm working on my doctorate. I go to Union Theological Seminary in New York City. There are a lot of people in my program or in other related programs who know far more about the fathers than I do, who know far more about the scriptures than I do, who know far more about church history than I do, and I know a lot about all those things, and none of them are believers. All right? You can know everything from a data point of view about Christian tradition, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything for your ability to be a disciple. Okay, so this touches on this question Alyssa raised earlier about how well sort of the church school model serves us or doesn't serve us. Ultimately, what we strive to teach in religious education in an Orthodox community is living faith. What is living faith? It's discernment of Christ in the world, right? Not Christian data. We are teaching people, or we're hoping we're teaching people, to be able to recognize and find Christ in their own lives, in the lives of people around them, and his action in the world. And not just find him, but when they find him, to know what to do next, to do what he tells them. Right? I recently taught up in Ottawa, actually, and I recognize somebody who was here at that training. Though you weren't there the night before when I gave my keynote, we took a chance and we went around the room and we asked people what was their most significant influence on the formation of their faith. And no one said, oh, this curriculum that my third grade teacher used, right? Everyone talked about a person in their life, a grandparent, a parent, a church school teacher. A lot of them talked about church school teachers. And every single teacher in that parish had gone through that parish's church school program and then had stayed to teach for 7, 8, 9 years. I was really impressed. I turned to the priest and I said, you're doing a good job here. But all of it was to say that people make the most impact. You make the most impact. And that is a completely Orthodox idea. Right? We think about, oh, what makes us Orthodox? All this makes us Orthodox. Yes, but the idea that you make the most impact is also Orthodox. All right? Christ came to us as a person. He didn't just send this. Right? And that interaction between Christ and everyone he met and everything he did is what fueled the rest of this. Okay, all these beautiful things that we use in the tradition are essentially only things that encapsulate and somehow capture the light and life of Christ. And that light and life has been passed since Jesus was with us to the next generation, to the next generation. And the problem is with some kinds of classroom teaching is we take that encapsulated thing and we flatten it into trivia. We flatten it into dates, figures, names, vocabulary, all those things that we say to our kids, you need to learn this stuff. And when we flatten it, we push the light and the light out. Right? And that's what we need to be careful in the teaching environments that we have, whatever kind of teaching environments they are, be it the home, be it the classroom, be it youth ministry, that's how we think about our Orthodox content. Not just about an accumulation of data, but essentially as a way of capturing that light and life of Christ that we're teaching people how to look for it in the world. All right. So I wanted to end real quick. Let's see. With just this. Who's heard this news? Right? The Bulgarian Orthodox Church has just been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Right? For what? For saving 48,000 Jews during World War II. All right, now I could lie to you and tell you that I know exactly what kind of religious education they were doing in Bulgaria in the 1940s, but I don't know. Okay. But I can tell you this much. It wasn't religious education on autopilot, right? It wasn't data instead of discernment. It was taking people's real lives and their real places seriously. And it wasn't a satisfaction or being satisfied, basically accumulating all the riches of Orthodox tradition kind of into bigger barns for themselves. By whatever combination of factors, shepherds, leaders, parents somehow passed on to a whole generation of church, because the whole church is being nominated, not just one bishop or two bishops or something, to a whole generation of church, the ability to recognize when they looked at what was going on in their world, that something was drastically wrong and they needed to do something completely right against incredible odds, right? That's what we're shooting for. We're not shooting for mastery of trivia. We're shooting for that kind of heroism, not in that kind of drama sort of situation, dramatic situation like you had in Bulgaria in 1943, but in the encounters that your kids will have in every day, to be able to look and assess, find Christ, and know what he wants them to do.